Recognizing the member from Peace River North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to speak to this bill, and I must begin by pointing out what every British Columbian already sees. This government has a very convenient relationship with timing. I'm just going to start with a statistic that, according to CMH Lower Mainland, by the time we reach 40 years old, half of us have or will develop a mental health problem. That's almost 1 million people. 84,000 children a year are diagnosed with a mental illness. There are 3 main triggers for mental health issues: substance abuse, alcohol, and stress. Well, I can tell you, our lives nowadays are very stressful. We see it in many different forms. It's convenient that in times like today, that one of those items is substance abuse, that I've asked previously in this House whether or not the Premier would remove the federal drug exemption that's allowed illicit drugs to pour onto our streets and in communities all over our province. These are the precursors that can affect and influence mental health all over our province for British Columbians. But when I've asked that question, I get no response. And when it comes to the main fixes and what we see with Mental Health Act, as what has been brought up by my colleagues, one that has just spoken, and one from a fellow colleague that's an independent, where I love her passion and how dedicated she is about the subject. We're not seeing the fix to the main issue. Instead, the fix that we see is to the liability for the government, because they're broke. They don't want to be sued and prosecuted. Every time they find themselves backed into a corner, every time a scandal surfaces, every time the public starts asking the hard questions, suddenly the minister appears with a brand new bill, waving it like a shiny distraction and hoping nobody looks too closely at what's actually inside it. And here we are again. Bill 32 isn't about improving mental health care. It isn't about beds, reducing wait times, or giving families in crisis real support. No, it's about protecting the system from accountability. Let's be honest and call it what it is: a liability shield, dropped into this legislature at the exact moment when the ministry's failures are piling up so high the public can't ignore them anymore. Clause 1 of this bill extends liability protection for authorized professional services, care, and treatment. Sounds harmless on paper until you realize what it actually means. It means the government is trying to protect the system from responsibility before it ever protects the patients trapped inside it. This amendment doesn't strengthen rights, it doesn't offer safeguards, it doesn't add oversight, it doesn't address the revolving door of mental health-related detention, release, crisis, repeat. But somehow, at this moment, at this precise moment, when British Columbians are losing faith in this government's ability to handle anything, the minister has decided that liability protection is their urgent priority. Imagine that. This government refuses to protect nurses from burnout, refuses to protect communities from violence, refuses to protect families trying to access care, but they have no problem rushing in here to protect themselves. Then we have Clause 2, which quietly removes a long-standing provision that deemed patients to have consented to treatment under certain conditions if authorized by the director. At first glance, this looks like a step forward. But again, look at the timing. This government has spent years ignoring mental health in crisis, families begging for help, years ignoring police, paramedics, and frontline workers who say the system is collapsing, years refusing to acknowledge the failures of involuntary care, the lack of follow-up services, and the dangers released into communities when patients are discharged without supports. And now suddenly, they are worried about consent. No, this is not about compassion. This is about optics. This government is changing the law just enough to appear responsive, but not enough to fix anything. The NDP's trademark, legislative theatre, paper solutions to the real problem. British Columbians aren't fooled anymore. If this government were serious about improving mental health outcomes, we would see real investments into long-term care, not liability protections. We would see mandatory follow-up and community supports, not new legal cover for the director. We would see transparency audits, accountability, not rushed. Last-minute amendments dropped quietly into the House when public attention is elsewhere. The people of this province deserve a government that acts because it's right, not because it's politically convenient. They deserve a mental health system built on responsibility, not one protected by legal shields. They deserve reforms driven by patient care and not driven by the political survival of a minister or premier. Bill 32 is not reform. It is reputation management. And British Columbians deserve better. I will be voting no to this bill because the only thing it does is take away British Columbians' right for civil recourse if they are treated wrongly by the system. And I will always choose what is best for British Columbians and not a government that encourages a federal drug exemption that fuels this crisis. Thank you, Madam Speaker.